You know, when you think of a honeycomb, you probably picture nature's perfect little pantry, right? But what if I told you it's also one of the most sophisticated engineering marvels on the entire planet, with a secret that's been hiding in plain sight for millions of years?
To find that secret, you have to do something expert beekeepers have known for centuries. You've got to change your perspective. See, if you look at a frame of honeycomb straight on, you can't really see to the bottom of the cells. But if you flip it upside down, suddenly it all becomes clear. And that little shift is the key to this whole mystery.
And there it is, the cells aren't level. They're not horizontal. Every single one, built by countless bees over millennia, has this precise, consistent, upward tilt of about 13 degrees. Now, this isn't random. This is a deliberate design. The big question is, why?
So let's dive in. Why this exact angle? What problem are the bees solving with this puzzling bit of perfection?
Well, like any good mystery, there's always an obvious suspect. So let's start there, with the answer you'll hear from just about any beekeeper: the common folklore.
And that answer is pretty simple. Bees tilt the cells up so the honey doesn't drip out. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? It totally appeals to our basic understanding of gravity. You tilt a cup up to keep the water from spilling. Case closed.
Well, it's logical, it's intuitive, and as we're about to find out, it is completely 100% wrong. This common sense answer is actually the big red herring in our story. So how do we actually bust a piece of folklore that's been around for over a century? Well, we do what science does best. We put it to the test.
Get this. Way back in 1883, a researcher named Muhlenhoff basically stated as fact that bees would flat out refuse to use cells that sloped downwards. And for 138 years, everyone just accepted it. Then, in 2021, a team of researchers decided to do something shockingly simple. They just took a frame, flipped it upside down in an active hive, and watched to see what the bees would do.
Okay, so the first myth to fall was the idea that this tilt was for the nursery. The queen had absolutely no problem laying eggs in those downward sloping cells. The pattern was perfect, and all the young bees emerged just fine. So right off the bat, we know the tilt has nothing to do with raising the brood. But what about the honey? This was the real test, right? The drip test. For 21 days, the researchers weighed both frames. And the result? I mean, look at this. The bees stored the exact same amount of nectar in the downward sloping cells. There was no leakage. Zero. The drip theory was officially and completely busted. So why doesn't the honey run out? If it's not the slope, what's going on? Well, it all comes down to physics. The inside of a wax cell has these teeny tiny nanoscale bumps. Those bumps, along with the honey's own surface tension, create this incredible gripping force. It's just like how you can flip a glass of water upside down with a card over it and the water stays in. That's what's really holding the nectar in place.
Okay, so if the tilt isn't for preventing drips, the mystery just got a whole lot deeper. And our next clue? Well, it comes from a very, very unexpected place. Outer space. But first, let's just rule something out. Could the tilt just be an accident, a side effect of bees building downwards? The evidence says no way. Bees maintain that same 13-degree upward tilt whether they're building down from the top of a hive or building up from the bottom into empty space. This proves it's a functional requirement, not some kind of construction quirk.
And here is the breakthrough clue. Back in 1985, NASA sent bees to space. And what happened? In zero gravity, they still built comb, but the tilt was completely chaotic. It was all over the place. They couldn't orient the cells correctly. The takeaway from this is huge. The bees are actively sensing gravity and deliberately engineering the tilt in response to it. And that brings us to the critical question, doesn't it? If the bees are building this tilt as a direct response to gravity, but we know for a fact it's not to stop honey from dripping, then what in the world is really going on here?
This is it. This is the real answer. And it turns out we've been asking the wrong question all along. It's not about hydrodynamics. It's about structural mechanics. The problem the bees are solving isn't containing a liquid. It's supporting an absolutely immense weight.
To really get this, you have to think about a wild colony. They're living in a hollow tree, right? No wooden frames, no steel wires for support. And that structure, made out of soft beeswax, has to hold their entire winter food supply, which can weigh up to 25 kilograms. That's about 55 pounds. How does a soft material like wax support that much dense liquid without just shearing apart? And here is the engineering genius. The weight of the honey is a force pulling straight down, right? Gravity. By tilting the cell up by 13 degrees, the bees cleverly redirect that force. About 10% of the stress that would normally try to rip the cell off its base gets shifted onto that strong vertical center wall of the comb. They're essentially turning a simple storage container into a self-supporting architectural truss, just like the kind you'd see in a bridge.
So why exactly 13 degrees? Why not 45 degrees, which would be even stronger? Well, this is where the genius of evolution and optimization comes in. A flat cell would give you the most storage space, but it would be incredibly weak. A really steep cell would be super strong, but it wouldn't hold nearly as much honey. 13 degrees, that's the evolutionary Goldilocks zone. It is the absolute perfect trade-off between structural integrity and storage capacity.
So let's just trace our path here. We started with a simple piece of beekeeper folklore, and after peeling back the layers, we ended up at a stunning masterpiece of biomechanical engineering.
We totally dismantled the myth about dripping honey, and we learned that surface tension is what's really doing that job. We disproved the theory that the tilt is just a construction accident, using clues from space. And we finally arrived at the amazing truth. The 13-degree tilt is a brilliant solution for managing the crushing structural load of the hive's own food stores. And that really leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. The honeybee doesn't just build a cup to hold liquid, it builds a sophisticated structural lattice, an architectural marvel designed for one specific purpose: to withstand the crushing weight of its own success.